turn to Trita Parsi. He's the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and joins me from here in Washington. Trita, welcome to the program. As you know, China has shown it can be an effective mediator. It helped broker the restoration of ties between longtime foes, Iran and Saudi Arabia. That happened back in March. So I guess my question to you is, can China once again play a constructive role when it comes to the crisis in Gaza?
China can certainly play a constructive role. I don't think, however, China can play the key role in the same manner that it did between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Of course, Qatar and Oman had also played a key role in that negotiation, but in the sense that in the last 5 days of that negotiation, it was mainly China that was hosting it and playing the mediation role. That central role, I don't think China can or is even seeking to play, but it certainly can play a helpful role. And help is going to be needed, because if this process continues to be held entirely in Western hands, we have seen that that does not lead to a solution for the last 40 years, and particularly today, where there is no pretense of playing the role of an honest broker. It's all about siding with this particular side in this conflict. The West is simply incapable of resolving this. So bringing additional countries, not just China, but also from the global South into the process, may be a necessity in order to be able to get this resolved.
And also the other question is, would a country like Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, even listen to someone like China? I mean, China's approach to this crisis, so very different from U.S. and Western approach.
If China were to put pressure, I don't think Netanyahu would have much of a choice to listen. Now, of course, he will try to find ways to balance it, et cetera, et cetera. But bottom line is, part of the reason why we have seen such a slaughter take place for the last 6 weeks is because there has been no pressure on the Israelis at all for a ceasefire. And whatever pressure has come from the international community had essentially been blocked by the United States. As long as that is the situation, unfortunately, the killing will continue, despite the fact that the situation in Gaza and the continued bombing of it risks a much larger military confrontation in the region as a whole, one that would clearly be to the detriment of the region, but also to the detriment of U.S. interests.
Let me read you a couple of bullet points, comments from President Xi Jinping from today's BRICS summit, and I'm just going to summarize these. There can be no security in the Middle East without a just solution to the question of Palestine. Only a two-state solution can bring peace. Attacks on civilians must end and hostages must be released. The collective punishment of people must stop. So from BRI to BRICS, Trita, are we perhaps seeing the makings of a new world order, a shift from Western rules-based world order?
We are shifting away from that. That's very clear. China, India, BRICS countries are going to play a much bigger role going forward. Rules are not going to exclusively be in the domain of the West. All of those changes are going to happen. However, how they happen, how painful it's going to be, how many conflicts are going to be as part of this shift is unclear at this point. But for the immediate situation in Gaza, I don't think that unless there is far more political will shown by BRICS countries to really push this matter, that we're going to see that dynamic play into the resolution of this conflict, at least not in the short term.
And what do you mean by pushing this matter from BRICS countries? What do you want to see them do or say?
Well, what really is needed is far greater pressure for a ceasefire, and that pressure directly has to be in conversations between many of these countries and the United States. The Biden administration is the one government that is blocking such a ceasefire at this point, in my view, to the detriment of U.S. interest itself. Unless that changes, we're not going to see any significant changes in the region or on the ground in Gaza itself.
Talk about why President Xi's vision in the global South has an appeal, and why people are listening, Trita, and why it has really sharpened discussions over whether the Western approach is the right approach when it comes to conflicts around the world.
Well, what you're seeing with the Chinese involvement, for instance, in the case of Iran and Saudi Arabia, it's profoundly different from how the West has approached Israel-Palestine. China was not on Saudi Arabia's side or on Iran's side in that mediation. It was truly neutral. Its interest was in getting an agreement that would make sure that these two countries would stop the type of destabilizing activities they both had engaged in the region. And it did so by help facilitating them moving in that direction. It did not try to use this as an opportunity to sell weapons. It did not try to use this as an opportunity to establish military bases in the Persian Gulf. That is fundamentally different from how the United States has approached these issues. And if we take a look at Israel-Palestine particularly, we see clearly that the United States has not even tried to be an honest broker for the last 20 years. 30 years ago, the United States cherished the idea that it was an honest broker. And after about a couple of years, it became politically inconvenient and costly for any American politician to say that the United States would be an honest broker in the conflict. It had to explicitly say that the United States is on the side of Israel. Being on the side of one of the parties in the conflict makes the United States and the West a party to the conflict, which makes it more difficult for them to be able to resolve it. That's a position and a degree of involvement that China so far has avoided, certainly in the case of Iran and Saudi Arabia, but also I would say to a very large extent when it comes to Israel and Palestine.